The archetype of the genius is deeply embedded in our cultural narrative. We envision the effortlessly brilliant scientist, the witty and eloquent writer, the strategic mastermind who navigates life's complexities with a serene, untroubled mastery. Society often views high intelligence as a unilateral blessing, a golden ticket to an easier, more successful, and inherently superior existence. The assumption is straightforward. Smarter people solve problems faster, grasp concepts instantly, avoid pitfalls with prescient clarity, and consequently, ascend the ladders of academia, career, and life with minimal friction. Their path, it seems, is illuminated by the cold, clear light of reason, untroubled by the emotional fog that slows the rest of us. But this pervasive myth is a profound and often painful oversimplification. The lived reality of possessing a highly intelligent mind is far more complex, nuanced, and frequently fraught with silent, internal struggles that remain invisible to the outside observer. Intelligence, particularly when it operates at the far end of the spectrum, is not merely a cognitive tool. It is a fundamental mode of experiencing the world, a lens that magnifies everything, including chaos, contradiction, and suffering. What is seen as a gift from the outside is often experienced from within as a weighty responsibility, a source of alienation, and a catalyst for profound existential questioning. Psychology and neuroscience have begun to peel back the layers on this phenomenon, moving beyond IQ scores to understand the concomitant emotional, social, and psychological profiles that frequently accompany high cognitive ability. Research has suggested correlations between intelligence and increased sensitivity to environmental stimuli, a higher prevalence of certain mood disorders, and unique social challenges. The very engine that drives innovation, deep understanding, and problem-solving can also, without the proper context and coping mechanisms, drive anxiety, isolation, and a pervasive sense of being out of sync with the world. This is not a plea for sympathy for the poor, smart person, but rather a crucial act of recognition and demystification. For the highly intelligent individual who has always felt strangely out of place, or for the friend, parent, or partner trying to understand a brilliant but troubled mind, this exploration seeks to validate a reality that is too often dismissed. The struggles are real, they are systemic, and they stem directly from the architecture of the intelligent mind itself. Here, we will delve deeply into 8 core struggles, not as a definitive list, but as a window into a complex inner landscape. And let's be absolutely clear from the outset. If this narrative resonates with you, if you see your own mind reflected in these patterns, you are not broken, you are not too much, and your intelligence is not a curse. It is a unique configuration that demands unique understanding. The goal is not to pathologize intelligence, but to articulate its shadow side, so that the gift can be fully harnessed without being undermined by its inherent challenges. So, let's begin the deep dive. Struggle 1. The unrelenting engine, overthinking and analysis paralysis. For the highly intelligent mind, thought is not a discrete activity switched on for problem solving and switched off for rest. It is a constant, humming background process, an unrelenting engine of analysis, deconstruction, and simulation. Your mind never truly shuts off. It operates in a state of perpetual engagement, dissecting every input with meticulous, often exhausting, detail. Consider a simple social interaction. For most, a passing comment is just that, a comment. It is heard, perhaps briefly considered, and then released. For the overthinking mind, it is a data point in a complex algorithm. The words themselves are parsed for literal meaning, but then the analysis expands exponentially. What was the tone? Was there a subtle emphasis on a particular syllable that implies sarcasm or hidden meaning? What was the facial microexpression that flashed for a fraction of a second as the words were spoken? How does this comment relate to previous interactions, building a pattern of behavior? What were the possible motivations for saying this, both benevolent and manipulative? And simultaneously, the mind is analyzing its own response. Was my reply adequate? Did I inadvertently reveal too much? Did I misread the context? This is the tyranny of overthinking. It's the mental replaying of conversations, decisions, and events, not just once, but in dozens of potential variations. What if I had said this? What if they meant that? What are the second and third order consequences of that choice I made last Tuesday? The mind becomes a theater staging endless performances of alternative realities, each one scrutinized for flaws and potential outcomes. Psychologists term this analysis paralysis, a state where the cognitive capacity for generating options and predicting outcomes becomes so robust that it actively impedes decision-making. When every path is mapped to its hypothetical conclusion, and every conclusion reveals potential risks and benefits, the act of choosing becomes agonizing. The intelligent mind, seeing 47 moves ahead on the chessboard, can become frozen by the sheer volume of strategic information. This isn't indecisiveness born of ignorance. It's paralysis born of an overabundance of foresight. The impact is profound. It can lead to chronic procrastination. Why decide now when more data might present itself? Social anxiety. The exhaustive pre- and post-analysis of every interaction is draining, and decision fatigue that saps the joy from everyday choices. While others move through life with a degree of intuitive, unanalyzed flow, the highly intelligent person can feel like they are constantly writing, directing, and critiquing a detailed screenplay of their own existence. The silent struggle is the craving for mental quiet, a single moment where the engine idles, and the frustrating, often lonely, reality that for you, it simply doesn't. This constant churn is just one facet of the experience. It naturally bleeds into the next great challenge, the profound difficulty of finding connection in a world that often seems content with the superficial. Struggle 2. The depth craving, social isolation, and the hunger for meaning. Human connection is a fundamental need. Yet, for many highly intelligent people, this need is perpetually frustrated by a qualitative gap in how they wish to connect and how most social interaction is structured. The mind that thrives on complexity, nuance, and abstraction often finds standard social fare, the weather, sports, gossip, casual banter, to be mentally barren. It's not that these topics are despised. They are simply insufficient as nutritional fuel for a ravenous intellect. You crave deep, meaningful conversations. You want to deconstruct the philosophy behind a political system, explore the psychological underpinnings of a film character's motives, debate ethical frameworks in emerging technology, or trace the historical patterns that led to a current event. To you, this isn't pretentious or heavy. It is the very substance of interesting interaction. It is play, but over lunch or at a party, attempting to pivot a conversation from weekend plans to, say, the implications of quantum mechanics for free will is often met with blank stares, awkward silences, or a polite but firm redirection back to safer, shallower waters. This repeated experience creates a deep sense of isolation. You can be physically surrounded by people, laughing and chatting, yet feel utterly, profoundly alone. A deep-sea diver trying to converse with those happily splashing in the shallows. This isn't about intellectual snobbery. It's a mismatch of cognitive appetites. The intelligent person often feels they must wear a social mask, deliberately dumbing down their conversation, feigning interest in topics that feel trivial, and withholding their most passionate thoughts for fear of being seen as intense, weird, or intimidating. This performative aspect of socialization is intensely draining. It reinforces a sense of being a perpetual outsider, a visitor from a different country who has learned the basic phrases but will never truly belong. The consequence is a social landscape that can feel barren. Friendships may feel superficial, leaving a hunger for a meeting of minds that seems frustratingly rare. This can lead to withdrawal, a preference for solitude where the mind is free to roam its own rich landscapes, over the exhausting labor of superficial engagement. The silent struggle is the longing for a true peer, not necessarily someone of equal IQ, but someone with equal depth, curiosity, and comfort with complexity. It is the loneliness of the deep thinker in a world that often celebrates the simple answer. And if you're nodding along right now, feeling seen, then do us a favor, hit that subscribe button. This channel is dedicated to exploring these hidden psychological landscapes, giving voice to experiences that are often left unspoken. By subscribing, you're not just getting more content, you're joining a community that values depth. So, take a second, hit subscribe, and let's continue this journey together. Struggle 3. Hyperawareness, seeing the strings and feeling the weight. The highly intelligent mind is, at its core, a pattern recognition machine operating at an exceptionally high resolution. It doesn't just see events, it sees the threads connecting them. It doesn't just hear words, it hears the subtle harmonics of emotion, intention, and subconscious belief beneath them. This hyperawareness is a double-edged sword of immense power and profound burden. On one hand, it grants what can seem like almost clairvoyant insight. You can walk into a room and sense the unspoken tension between two people. You can detect the faintest note of inauthenticity in a person's smile or a politician's speech. You can see the hidden structure in a complex system, anticipate problems long before they manifest, and understand people's motivations, sometimes better than they understand themselves. This is the useful side, the strategic advantage, the empathetic attunement. But the other edge of the sword cuts deeply into your own peace. Because this awareness doesn't have an off switch, you are constantly bombarded with data that others filter out. You notice the cashier's forced cheer masking exhaustion. You absorb the anxious energy of a friend who claims they're fine. You see through manipulative tactics in advertising, relationships, or workplace politics that others fall for. You are acutely aware of global suffering, systemic injustices, and existential threats in a visceral, immediate way that can be overwhelming. This constant, high-fidelity input is cognitively and emotionally exhausting. It's like having a security camera system monitoring 100 different feeds in your mind, 24/7, with no break. Your brain is perpetually processing, interpreting, and assigning emotional weight to stimuli that pass others by. This can lead to a form of sensory and emotional overload. The negativity, dishonesty, and chaos of the world aren't abstract concepts. They are vivid, pressing realities constantly pressing against your consciousness. Furthermore, this hyperawareness can breed a deep-seated cynicism or sadness. When you constantly see these strings, the selfish motives, the petty deceptions, the broken systems, it becomes hard to maintain naive optimism or simple faith. You may feel like the only sober person at a party of deluded revelers, a feeling that is isolating and heavy. The silent struggle is the desperate wish, at times, for the bliss of ignorance, to not see the pattern of dysfunction in your family, the flawed logic in a beloved tradition, or the inevitable consequence of a collective bad decision. But you do see it. And with that sight comes a weight of knowledge and, often, a feeling of helpless responsibility. This burden of seeing and knowing feeds directly into the immense, often external, pressure to translate that intelligence into tangible, flawless success. Struggle 4. The tyranny of expectation, imposter syndrome, and the fear of failure. From a young age, the highly intelligent person is often labeled the smart one, the gifted kid, the brain. With this label comes a set of colossal, often unspoken expectations. People, teachers, parents, peers, and later, colleagues and bosses begin to expect not just competence, but consistent, effortless excellence. Your identity becomes entangled with your ability to perform intellectually. The narrative is, you're smart, therefore everything should come easy to you. This creates an internal and external pressure cooker. Internally, you may adopt the belief that to be valued, you must always be right, always have the answer, always be the top performer. Any deviation from perfect mastery is seen not as a normal human lapse, but as a catastrophic failure of identity. Externally, the world is often less forgiving of your mistakes. A peer might get a pass for an error with a "well, they tried their best." But for you, the response can be a confused, "but I thought you were smart," or a joking, "Did you finally have a dumb moment?" These comments, often meant lightly, land with the force of a sledgehammer, reinforcing the fear that your worth is conditional on impeccable performance. This fertile ground is where imposter syndrome takes root and flourishes. Coined by psychologists Pauline Clance and Suzanne Imes, imposter syndrome is the pervasive psychological phenomenon of doubting one's accomplishments and fearing being exposed as a fraud despite evident success. For the intelligent person, it manifests as a voice that whispers, "You only succeeded because it was easy / the standards were low / you got lucky." Sooner or later, they'll figure out you don't really belong here. Every achievement is discounted. Every mistake is magnified as the true evidence of your inadequacy. The pressure to maintain the facade of the infallible genius leads to chronic anxiety, risk aversion, and burnout. You may avoid challenging new endeavors not out of laziness, but out of a terror of failing and having the smart label ripped away, revealing what? You believe there is nothing of substance beneath the intellectual performance. You become trapped in a gilded cage of your own and others' expectations, where the fear of falling short is more powerful than the desire to soar. The silent struggle is the desperate need to be seen as a whole, flawed human being, allowed to be confused, to struggle, to fail, and to learn, without it threatening the very core of how others perceive and value you. And speaking of challenge, the intelligent mind doesn't just fear failure, it actively withers in the face of monotony. This brings us to a struggle that is often mistaken for laziness or arrogance. Struggle 5. The aversion to monotony, chronic boredom, and the need for stimulation. The highly intelligent brain is a high-performance engine. It is designed for solving novel problems, making unexpected connections, and wrestling with complexity. It operates optimally when engaged in challenging, meaningful work. However, much of modern life, and many modern jobs, is built on repetition, routine, and simplified processes. For the intelligent mind, this is a form of slow torture. Routine tasks, filling out repetitive forms, attending meetings that could have been emails, engaging in small talk, performing the same procedural work day after day, are not just boring. They can feel psychologically painful. The brain, craving stimulation and finding none, begins to disengage. This is where the behaviors that others misinterpret emerge: zoning out in meetings, procrastinating on mundane tasks, appearing forgetful or disorganized about trivialities, or losing motivation entirely. This is not laziness. Laziness implies an unwillingness to expend effort. The issue here is not effort, but engagement. The intelligent person will expend colossal effort on a problem that captures their interest, working for hours in a state of flow. They will, however, instinctively resist expending even minimal effort on tasks that feel mentally vacant. It's the difference between asking a race car to commute in city traffic and asking it to run on an open track. One will cause the engine to sputter and stall, the other allows it to perform as designed. Without adequate mental challenge, the intelligent person can fall into apathy, depression, or engage in self-sabotage just to create some form of chaos to analyze and resolve, a perverse way of self-stimulating. They may seek complexity in unnecessary places, overcomplicating simple tasks just to make them interesting enough for the brain to latch onto. The silent struggle is the constant hunt for food for the mind in an environment that often feels like a cognitive desert, and the social penalty that comes from being perceived as unreliable or disinterested when, in truth, you are simply starving for substance. If you've ever been called lazy for failing at a simple task, while simultaneously burning the midnight oil on a fascinating project, you know this paradox all too well. Your engagement isn't conditional on ease, it's conditional on depth. And that search for depth inevitably leads to setting standards for yourself that are astronomically, impossibly high. Struggle 6. The perfectionist's prison, when high standards become self-sabotage. Intelligence and perfectionism are frequent, though fraught, companions. The ability to envision an ideal outcome, to see the intricate details of a flawless performance or a perfect product, sets a compelling internal benchmark. For the highly intelligent person, good enough is often a meaningless phrase. If you can conceive of a 100% perfect solution, why would you settle for 95%? Why would anyone? This drive can lead to exceptional work, meticulous craftsmanship, and profound innovation. But when it becomes maladaptive, a term psychologists use to describe behaviors that are harmful despite being goal-oriented, it turns into a prison. Maladaptive perfectionism is the belief that any mistake, any flaw, any deviation from the ideal is a profound personal failure. It's not about the pursuit of excellence. It's about the avoidance of the shame and inadequacy associated with being imperfect. This manifests in devastating ways. Procrastination becomes a tool. If you don't start, you can't fail to be perfect. Projects are never finished because there's always one more tweak, one more revision, one more source to check. Opportunities are passed up because you don't feel 100% ready, a state that never arrives. Simple tasks balloon into epic, time-consuming ordeals as you get lost in perfecting insignificant details. The focus shifts from the joy of creation or problem-solving to a terrified vigilance against the appearance of any flaw. The toll is immense: chronic stress, burnout, creative paralysis, and a perpetual sense of never being good enough. You become your own most brutal critic, a tyrant who would never impose such standards on others, but enforces them mercilessly on yourself. Every accomplishment is hollow because your eye goes immediately to the tiny imperfection no one else noticed. The silent struggle is the longing for the freedom to be messy, to experiment, to learn through failure, and to see your own work with the same compassionate, forgiving eye you might offer to others. But the internalized equation, my performance equals my worth, is a difficult one to break. This relentless inner critic is part of a broader, more fundamental cognitive stance, a deep, often relentless, skepticism towards accepted truths. Struggle 7. The unquiet mind, questioning everything and the discomfort of certainty. The intelligent mind is, by nature, inquisitive and skeptical. It does not easily accept axioms, traditions, or authoritative pronouncements at face value. The default question is not how, but why. Why do we do it this way? Why is this considered true? What is the underlying evidence? What are the alternative perspectives? This applies to societal structures, political ideologies, workplace protocols, and even to one's own deeply held beliefs and emotions. This trait is the engine of scientific progress, philosophical advancement, and social change. It protects against dogma, gullibility, and manipulation. However, in daily life, it can be profoundly destabilizing and isolating. When you constantly question the foundations of things, be it a religious tradition your family holds dear, the unspoken rules of corporate culture, or the very meaning of success, you can feel unmoored. You live in a state of perpetual cognitive dissonance, aware of the gaps and contradictions in the narratives that others use to navigate life smoothly. This questioning extends inward, leading to intense metacognition, thinking about your own thinking. You analyze your emotions. Am I really angry? Or am I just tired and projecting? You dissect your motivations. Do I want this because I truly value it, or because I've been conditioned to want it? This can lead to a sense of inauthenticity or paralysis, as even your own internal states feel subject to debate. Socially, this constant questioning can be misinterpreted as contrarianism, arrogance, or an inability to just go with the flow. In environments that value conformity and quick, decisive action, the person asking the foundational, probing questions can be seen as an obstacle, a troublemaker. It becomes exhausting to constantly bite your tongue or to navigate the social fallout of challenging a comfortable, if unexamined, consensus. The silent struggle is the tension between your innate drive to seek truth and your human need for belonging, stability, and the comfort of shared certainty. It is the loneliness of the perpetual why in a world of because. And this deep engagement with the world's and your own internal complexities doesn't just stay in the realm of thought. It has a profound and often heavy emotional consequence. Struggle 8. The empathetic burden, emotional contagion, and carrying the weight of the world. There is a strong, though not universal, correlation between high cognitive intelligence and high emotional sensitivity or empathy. The same cognitive machinery that analyzes complex systems can be turned inward to model the internal states of others with startling accuracy. You don't just observe sadness in a friend. You intellectually and viscerally understand its sources, its nuances, its potential trajectory. You get it on a level that is both profound and burdensome. This is where the psychological concept of emotional contagion becomes particularly potent. Emotional contagion is the automatic, subconscious tendency to mimic and synchronize with the emotions of those around us. For the highly intelligent, highly empathetic person, this process is amplified. Your brain doesn't just notice emotion, it downloads it. You can walk into a party and instantly feel the ambient anxiety. A colleague's frustration becomes a knot in your own stomach. News of a distant tragedy can trigger a depressive episode, as your mind fully grasps the scale of the suffering and your own helplessness to affect it. You absorb other people's pain, their anxiety, their anger. You carry emotional weight that isn't yours to carry, simply because your mind is built to comprehend it so completely. This can lead to a few dangerous patterns. First, you may become an emotional sponge in relationships, constantly trying to fix others' moods to alleviate your own discomfort from their negative emotions. Second, you might engage in avoidance, withdrawing from social situations or news consumption to protect your own fragile emotional ecosystem. Third, and most insidiously, you may confuse this absorbed emotion for your own, leading to periods of unexplained sadness, irritability, or anxiety. The silent struggle here is the lack of an emotional boundary. It's the feeling of being porous, of having no skin to keep the world's chaos out. It is exhausting to constantly process not only your own rich inner life, but also the emotional undercurrents of every person and environment you encounter. The gift of deep understanding becomes a curse of constant overwhelm, a feeling of being emotionally responsible for things far beyond your control. Conclusion: the gift and its burden towards balance and belonging. Being highly intelligent, as we have seen, is not about having all the answers. It is about living with all the questions all the time. It is about seeing the world in layers of complexity, pattern, and emotion that remain invisible to many. This is a rare and powerful gift. It allows for creativity, insight, and innovation that can change the course of fields and lives. The capacity for deep thought, profound empathy, and visionary foresight is not something to be wished away. But the awareness that comes with it can be lonely, confusing, and painfully intense. The struggles of overthinking, social isolation, hyperawareness, crushing expectations, chronic boredom, maladaptive perfectionism, relentless questioning, and empathetic overload are the shadow side of the brilliant light. They are the real, psychological costs of a mind built to operate at a different frequency. If this exploration has felt like a mirror, if you have seen your own silent battles articulated here, please hold this truth close. Your mind is not a curse. It is not too much. You are not broken for finding the world overwhelming or for craving more depth than it often provides. Your struggles are the direct, understandable result of a cognitive style that is out of sync with many of the structures and rhythms of ordinary life. The path forward is not about dimming your light, but about learning to wield it with balance, boundaries, and self-compassion. It requires seeking your tribe. Actively look for communities, online or in person, where deep conversation and intellectual curiosity are valued. A single authentic connection can alleviate years of isolation. Managing the engine. Develop practices to quiet the overthinking mind through mindfulness, immersive physical activity, creative expression, or structured worry time. Redefining success. Actively dismantle the imposter syndrome and perfectionism by separating your worth from your output. Embrace good enough and the growth that comes from visible, human mistakes. Creating stimulation. Design your life and career to incorporate continuous, meaningful challenge. Seek roles that demand problem-solving and learning, and create complex hobbies to feed your mind in your downtime. Building emotional boundaries. Learn to recognize when you are absorbing emotions that are not yours. Practice grounding techniques and compassionate detachment. You can understand another's pain without making it your permanent residence. Honoring your nature. Stop apologizing for your depth, your curiosity, or your sensitivity. These are not flaws. They are the signature of your unique mind. The world needs deep thinkers, sensitive souls, and relentless questioners. It needs people who see the layers. Your struggle is real, but it is the price of a perspective that is desperately needed. The goal is not to become someone else, but to become a more integrated, self-aware, and resilient version of yourself. Someone who can protect their gift while sharing it with the world. If this resonated with you, if it gave language to something you felt but couldn't name, then your engagement is crucial. This is where you come in. We build this understanding together. So, take a moment right now. Like this video if you see your own mind in this description. Share it with someone, a friend, a partner, a family member, who needs to understand this perspective or who might see themselves in it. And most importantly, subscribe to the channel. By subscribing, you tell the algorithm that this kind of deep, psychological content matters. You ensure we can keep creating videos that explore the hidden corners of the human mind, offering validation and insight for those who think and feel deeply. And finally, comment below. Tell us which struggle resonated most with you. Share your own experiences. Ask your questions. The comments section isn't just a box. It's the beginning of the community we're talking about, a place for the deep, meaningful exchange of ideas that your mind craves. You are not alone in this. Your voice matters here. Let's start the conversation. Remember, you're not too much. You just think deeper than most. And in a world of surface noise, that depth is your superpower. Now, let's learn how to wield it together. Subscribe, share, like, and comment. Let's build this space. Now,